Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it's been 2 weeks since our first vote on a clean continuing resolution to keep the government open. The shutdown could have been avoided well before it began. But because Democrats have not budged from their partisan demands, the shutdown is now entering its third day. Now, Mr. President, there's a lot that we could be doing right now. We could be considering bipartisan appropriations bills through regular order, going to conference on the 3 appropriations bills we passed in August, or passing the bipartisan annual defense bill. But instead, we're stuck in a shutdown mess of Democrats' making. And the American people are suffering as a result. Mr. President, Republicans remain united around a clean, nonpartisan funding extension. It's passed the House of Representatives, and it's currently sitting right here in the Senate, ready to be voted on. It has no new Republican policies, no partisan policy riders. It's straightforward, simple, and clean. All it does is reopen the government through November the 21st to give us more time to pass appropriations bills here on the floor. We have a number of bipartisan bills waiting for floor consideration right now. The only thing standing in the way of reopening the government and getting back to doing the important work is Democrats' $1.5 trillion in partisan spending demands. That's right, $1.5 trillion. Their partisan proposal demands more money, think about this, more money than our entire defense budget just to keep the government open for 4 weeks. That's not a credible proposal. It's a far-left wish list. And it's not how we're going to do things around here. Mr. President, we can end this shutdown in just a few hours. We need to take one roll call vote, just one roll call vote on the House-passed clean continuing resolution. The President of the United States says that he's ready to sign it. We just need a handful of Democrats to agree. Now, once we get the government back open, then we can talk about the issues that Democrats are raising. But we can't do that while they're holding the federal government hostage to their partisan demands. Mr. President, whatever Democrats are saying publicly, I think privately they are all well aware of the problems with their current position. The senior senator from Massachusetts has said, and I quote, "Hostage tactics are the last resort for those who can't win their fights through elections, can't win their fights in Congress, can't win their fights for the presidency, and can't win their fights in the courts," end quote. The Democrat leader called shutdowns, and I quote, "a politics of idiocy, of confrontation, of paralysis," end quote. Mr. President, this shutdown needs to end sooner rather than later. And there's only one way out of it. Democrats need to vote for the clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution sitting right there. All it takes is one roll call vote. The government's back open. And Mr. President, we need to get this government back open, which we can do very, very quickly. And then we can talk about whatever we need to talk about. Just a few years ago, the Democrat leader had this to say, and I quote again, "We're allowed to come here and disagree over policy. In fact, our system of government was designed to allow for progress, despite our large and sometimes raucous differences. But when one side throws a temper tantrum and uses the basic functioning of our government as leverage in a policy argument, our system of government breaks down," end quote. Well, Mr. President, let's hope the Democrat leader decides to heed his own words and the Democrats' temper tantrum ends sooner rather than later. Mr. President, later today, a couple hours, Democrats will have another opportunity to vote for the clean continuing resolution. And we'll see if they're still committed to their shutdown politics. Republicans remain ready to reopen the government and to get back to doing the American people's business. How much longer this shutdown lasts depends entirely on Democrats. The choice is theirs. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
The Democratic leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Well, Mr. President, it's day 3 of the Trump shutdown, and the government remains closed because Donald Trump and Republicans insist on raising Americans' health care premiums and kicking millions off their insurance. Sending premiums skyrocketing, as Republicans insist, is fundamentally unsustainable. The American people overwhelmingly support affordable health care. 70% of Americans support extending the ACA premium tax credit, according to a poll released yesterday by the Washington Post. And another poll by KFF yesterday found that nearly 80% support an extension. Guess what? Even a majority of Trump supporters support an extension. Even a majority of Trump supporters, by nearly 60%, support an extension. You don't need the polls. Just go into a barbershop. Just go into a diner. Just go into a supermarket and ask people. People are learning about this issue, and they're aghast that their premiums could go up so much. They're aghast that our Republican colleagues don't even want to fix it when it affects so many tens of millions of people, and the amount that it goes up is so high, so high. It's not difficult. We know Americans want this, and we know many of my Republican colleagues want this as well. But failure to act would be devastating. And Republicans know it. Even Donald Trump knows it. He talked about it a little bit with us in the White House when we went a few days back. If we don't act now, then at least 22 million people will see their health care premiums double on average. But for many people, it's even worse than that. If these ACA premium tax credits aren't extended, the average 55-year-old couple making $85,000 a year would see their premiums not just double, but triple. $25,000 a year. How is a senior citizen, even one that has a little bit of savings and a little bit of a cushion, afford $25,000 a year? So that is all Democrats want to fix. We are on the side of the people. People know it and want it and need it. It's not complicated. Americans want it. Republican voters want it. Democrats remain ready and willing to work with the other side. We're ready to work on a path forward to lower health care costs for the American people and fund the federal government. I yield the floor.
House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune are speaking out on day 3 of the government shutdown today. The two top Republican leaders, they held a press conference just hours ahead of a crucial vote in the Senate to reopen federal doors. All eyes will be on lawmakers to see if they can actually advance a Democratic short-term funding bill and a Republican House passed bill to keep the lights on. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson on that.
We sent over a continuing clean resolution. This is standard practice around here. And all the Democrats who are voting against it in the Senate right now, every single one of them have given impassioned speeches about how you must pass continuing resolutions, you must pass CRs, you should never shut down the government because it's dangerous and destructive and selfish and wrong. Well, suddenly they've changed their tune. We're playing, I invite you all after the press conference to go by the Speaker's office in the hallway there, and you can see the highlight reel of all of them saying this passionately, as recently as March of this last year, when Chuck Schumer led his caucus to vote for the same CR. They did it 13 times during the Biden administration in the previous 4 years, but suddenly they won't do it.
All right, let's go live to the Capitol and CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, any indication that we'll actually see a breakthrough during this vote later today?
Yeah, well, I think as you heard from the speaker, I mean, look, at this point, Republican leaders feel that the ball is in Democrats' court in terms of trying to support that bill that Speaker Johnson referenced that passed his chamber. That's just a clean extension of government funding. But I asked both him and Leader Thune about their roles in this shutdown fight. Take a listen. Do you take any responsibility for what's happening? And what is the justification for not holding votes in your chamber this week and potentially yours this weekend when there are some bipartisan conversations happening in the Senate? Why not just stay here and work this out?
I'll give you my quick answer. I'll yield to the leader, but my quick answer is very simple. The House did its job. The House sent a bipartisan, very simple, very conventional 24-page continuous resolution to keep the lights on. And we sent it over, we passed it, and it's been rejected by the Senate.
We're in a shutdown posture here because of Senate Democrats. There is united support, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, a few Senate Democrats, the President of the United States in support of keeping or opening the government back up. And right now it's being blocked by the Senate Democrats. And all it takes, as you point out, is a handful more. We get 4 or 5 more votes and we can actually pass this thing. And there are discussions going on with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. But at some point they have to take yes for an answer. I mean, the things that people want, and I don't disagree with this at all, is a normal appropriations process, putting bills on the floor, getting conference passed bills on the floor of the House and Senate so we can actually fund the government the old-fashioned way. And I'm all for that. And we've made that very clear to them.
Now, in terms of some of those bipartisan discussions, I did talk to one Democratic senator who has been involved in some of those talks that we saw earlier this week on the Senate floor. This senator did not indicate how they might vote later today with respect to these procedural votes around government funding, but they were encouraged by the direction that these talks are going, even though we have yet to see any kind of firm agreement. Of course, Democrats have been pressing for this extension of subsidies around the Affordable Care Act, which are due to expire at the end of the year. They want some guarantees around that, as well as other issues related to health care in order to be able to support government funding going forward. So, I am told that some of those discussions are expected to continue throughout the weekend, even if senators end up going home should this vote later today fail.
Okay, Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill for us today. Thank you. And now let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady with the economic side of this shutdown. Because, Kelly, we were supposed to get a new jobs report this morning. That is now delayed. What is the economic concern if this shutdown continues?
So there's a couple of different things, Mugo, of how I would think about this. Obviously, you have the very obvious financial situation plight of the federal worker that is either laid off and gets that back pay eventually, or potentially is even fired. And when that person is having to dip into their savings, they're having to maybe not pay rent, miss a credit card payment, they're not out spending that money that they traditionally would. And remember, GDP is 2/3 consumer spending. So that's part of it. Yeah. Another part would be more of the consumer angle. You and me, maybe someone has a federal-backed mortgage and they live in a particular area that's impacted by flooding or by hurricanes. They are required by law for that federal-backed mortgage to get a application at the National Flood Insurance Program. Right now, that is not happening, right? Because the government is shut down. And so you're delaying some of these transactions, these spending that creates economic growth. And then the final thing, you mentioned the jobs report. Normally I'm at the New York Stock Exchange talking to you about the numbers, how investors are reacting. That's one part of it. But when you don't have that data, when you don't have potentially in a week and a half the inflation data that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is expected to release, when the Federal Reserve, when they meet at the end of this month and they don't have the traditional sources of information that they rely on, they could be more cautious in terms of how they approach interest rates. And we know from the last Federal Reserve meeting, there was a lot of division amongst folks of how they should treat interest rates going forward. Do you prioritize the labor market and the weakness that we've seen, or do you prioritize the rising prices partly because of tariffs? And so I bring that up as an economic concern because it's not just about, okay, how the Federal Reserve is going to decide. That cascades down to your mortgage rates, your auto loans, your small business loans. And at the heart of it, when small businesses, when consumers are able to borrow money for cheaper, that often does lead to more economic activity. And if you have a more cautious Federal Reserve, maybe an interest rate cut that doesn't happen, then you would see less economic activity potentially, Mugo.
A lot to keep our eyes on. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for that breakdown.